That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
No tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
Fairly alarmed here.
Welcome to Masters of the Nerdiverse podcast presents Ready to Scare, where we give a retrospective on the mix of horror and fashion. And we break down some of the most iconic characters to their, I would say, bone-chilling looks and see how we can either critique or improve upon them. I'm, of course, your host, Mike G, and I am more than ecstatic to introduce to our little podcast Peter Porker Power Hour's own Alejandro. How's it going, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. We're gonna have some fun. As Duke would say from The Predator, we're gonna have us some fun. We're gonna have us some fun. Right before he got his head exploded from a plasma
Exactly.
caster. Nice. Yes. So we're doing something a little different. And I thank you for being on this episode to kind of help me uh, break down the looks of these characters from this iconic film created by Clive Barker, which is, of course, Hellraiser.
Hellraiser, yes.
It's what's your history with this movie? Have you did you see it at a young age? Did you see it later in life? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I watched the original Hellraiser, I think back when maybe I was like 10 or so. And
Yeah.
I mean, back then I was like, oh, this is actually really creepy. Why am I watching this film? This is really scary. Um, and so I definitely took a while before watching number two, just because I was freaked out. Like, I think I remember like having some nightmare of like just hooks grappling to me.
Right.
And of course nowadays I'm like, oh, it's like no big deal, whatever. But I watched Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2 Hellbound, and I haven't seen a lot of the other ones. Just I think honestly I didn't realize there were so many of them. And I know there was recently like a new one that came out, but I haven't watched that either. I think just because I feel like with as the story continued through like films 3 through I think it's 8,
Right. There's a
like
lot of them.
I think Clive Barker's original vision kind of got lost a little bit.
Absolutely.
And even with just number two, it was already kind of straying away from the book and what the stories were written said.
Absolutely. And just to give kind of a brief thoughts on that, it's you're not missing anything out, from 3 to like 8, because it's
Well, that's
all,
good.
yeah, you're not missing much. And that's me coming from a diehard Hellraiser fan. It's like Clive's vision was really only really truly articulated when he directed it, sadly enough. In
Exactly.
in Hellbound and Hell on Earth, and even the one in space, it was like Hellraiser, Bloodline. Like you said, the vision just strayed from the Hellbound Heart novel and just kind of what these creatures were originally supposed to be. And I think that the first two films, if out of all of them, really encapsulate the actual feel for these angels to some, demons to others,
Right.
type of
Right.
creatures known as the Cenobites. And I think it would be,
Exactly. I agree.
you know what I mean? So, absolutely. So, I think a good place to start with our five-part introspective is to start with the most iconic. Let's start with the lead Cenobite, as he is known in the original casting. They didn't, Clive has gone on record to say he never really wanted him to be called Pinhead. It's not a name he really liked. So he never really gave him a name. At the most, his original name was known as the Engineer.
Yes.
Just because he was kind of like the train conductor on this highway to hell, or this train way to hell, as it were. Is it in what I love about their design, to go into kind of their individual looks, was this almost uniformity to their looks. It looks almost militaristic, or even religious based, I would say, where it's just like this is their standard garb. You know what I mean? Just keep,
Right.
making them a a unit rather than individual aliens or predators or things like that. What makes them stand out?
Right. Right. I think, and they all wear this very fetishistic black leather that do resemble like religious clothing. Um, they also kind of resemble something you would wear at a butcher shop. So it's a
Yes,
nice little mixture of both, which I think accurately describes the Cenobites. Um, I mean, a lot of the clothing for all the Cenobites that we see throughout the different films obviously carry their own supports pieces or their own supporting tools, their own piercings. Um, I agree what you said about like how they are kind of religious because we do see them residing in a sort of monastery in hell, which is
hmm
governed by an abbot, has these religious markings, and it's definitely shown even in the first scene where you see our Cenobites.
absolutely. Even the term Cenobite means member of a communal religious order. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think that Clive was really pulling on that religious aspect to kind of give it a dark mirror to what uh, is the standard look for religious organizations. And like you said, it's a funny, and you mentioned it's a really nice blend of butcher and like, let's say, priest, or nun for that matter, in regards to the female Cenobite. So I think, and actually a lot of their look drew inspiration like from the punk fashion scene at the time. A lot of it was
Yes,
from
yes.
the S&M clubs in New York and Amsterdam, and of
Hmm.
course Catholicism. Really helped. Clive Barker, who himself is a great artist. If you've ever seen Clive Barker's artwork, it's really, you can tell he drew these out himself. You know what I mean? Like it's just his design. Cool. So let's go into the general look of Pinhead himself.
Sure.
Doug Bradley portrayed the character as this stoic, almost soft-spoken villain that, for the first time in horror movie history, you can actually just talk to. I always thought that was a good, cool part of his personality, and it kind of was portrayed in his leather look. Um,
We'll see, and I don't know if I agree that he's necessarily the villain of the films or the
he's
film
not.
series.
He's actually not. That's a good
Right,
point.
right.
Yes.
Like I think for those who haven't seen the films, they see Pinhead and are scared and automatically assume this is the antagonist of the film, when in reality, Pinhead's kind of the one that ends up saving people.
I love that thought, is that they're more like a force of nature. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
yes.
They're they're not they're not the driving force of the story, and they're more of just they're, it's so well done that they're more of just kind of like a seasoning, based on the love triangle
Yeah,
between Julia, Frank, and her husband, and they are kind of
right.
like the enforcers of their intentions. You know what I mean? Like, this is you've acted this way. We are the reaction. You know
Right.
what I mean? That's pretty
Well,
cool.
and even in number two with Kirsty, when Kirsty comes in, well, and number one, of course,
Hmm.
again, like Pinhead, they are not necessarily after her necessarily based on the actions of other individuals at play, and they really kind of are the ones that, for lack of a better phrase, save her.
Yes, absolutely. They do save the day. They bail her out on a couple of occasions, actually, between the first two movies. And it's kind of cool how these are one of the only horror characters that can do that.